Joined now by Frank Duvel, who's a senior researcher of migration at Oxford University. He has an interesting story. He himself was forced to flee the country of Ukraine with his wife and young family a week ago. Let's talk to Frank Duvel now, who is a researcher of migration at Oxford University. Yes, Frank, do tell us how close that refugee situation is to what you expected to see at this point.
I had published a warning in December last year talking about 10 million people, which is half of those who would be affected by the invasion. And things are indeed worse than I expected. More people are displaced. The bombing is much more severe, and more cities are already affected within 2 weeks only. I also didn't expect things happening so quickly.
We've seen Poland absorb the majority of refugees going across the border from Ukraine, 1.6 million refugees. What sort of support does Poland need now from the international community to support this effort?
Poland certainly needs know-how, material and financial support. Poland is extremely generous and welcoming, but the authorities and the city municipalities are not prepared. So the quicker the EU mobilizes support, the better that is. But we mustn't forget that more than 1/3 also go to other countries, Hungary, Slovakia and Romania, who are in a similar position and require support.
And as we said in your introduction, you were a refugee yourself. You experienced the scenes, some of which we've seen on television, which may have been similar to yours. Can you describe for us your experience, and when you see those pictures coming from Ukraine, how it makes you feel?
I wouldn't describe myself as a refugee. I'm in a much more privileged position. I was in Ukraine the week the war broke out with my wife, who is Ukrainian. We were visiting grandparents. I hold lectures at the university. I was prepared for the worst, and the moment the sirens went off, we took our handbags, we took our pushchair and the baby, and our parents-in-law drove us to the border. We were walking to the border in the most classical fashion, up and down hills with our pushchair, with the baby, queuing for hours. Took about 20 hours from Western Ukraine, where we were, Lviv, to Warsaw. That was for a researcher quite an interesting experience, I admit. But I had been in other crises before, like in Turkey, on the Greek islands, on the Balkans, when we saw the track of 1 million people fleeing Syria.
Frank, you have experience of refugee crises like this. How do you see it playing out? Do you think the majority of those refugees that are in Poland now are likely to stay there? What's the absorption rate like for a country like Poland?
This is very difficult to say. It all depends whether or not the war continues, whether occupation continues, what kind of occupation regime we get in Ukraine, what kind of destruction we have. In Western Europe, we generally talk about mobile populations, we talk about aging and shrinking societies. Many more million Poles have left the country over the year than we now have Ukrainians in the country. So it could well be that even several million Ukrainians could be more or less easily absorbed in Western Europe. The main challenge, I suppose, is that half of them are children. They have to go to school, to kindergarten, have to be educated in a foreign country, foreign language, and so on. The other half at the moment are mostly women. So they are caring for the family, all separated from their husbands. And it is not yet clear, depending on the outcome of the war, whether the husbands will be able to join them anytime soon, or whether the families can go back to Ukraine anytime soon.